Welcome back to AdNac Accent Coaching. My name's Allison. Request recently on my channel, someone asked me to explain the pronunciation of words like hardly and thirdly. So first of all, I'm going to go over the R sound. I have a cute little chart that I've made, and the R sound in hardly is R, just like the letter R. So instead of saying the full word with both syllables, let's just say the first syllable first. Hard. Okay, so if you have the R in hard, now let's work on two syllables. Hardly. So if you're finding you're saying hardly or hard, you're going to need to finish the R first before doing any sounds that come after it. So if you're saying hard, like hard, like with a British kind of accent with no R sound, you're going to want to pretend that hard is a two-syllable word now, where the first syllable finishes on R and the next syllable starts with the D. So instead of hardly, now we're going to say hardly. The only point of this is to get the R to ring out longer so that it doesn't disappear on the way to those other consonants. So hardly, hard, hardly, hardly, hardly. So try it a few different times, and I kind of like have a conversation where this is the only word that you use, like hardly. Oh, hardly, 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 hardly. So you can do that with any word. You're allowed to practice by yourself. No one can stop you, unless maybe you're at like a public library. If you want to practice speech sounds out loud with your mouth, that's the only way you can learn to change your speech. You can't learn to change your speech in your head. You can't practice your speech inside your head. You can't sing inside of your own head. Singers have to practice by singing out loud, using their bodies. You can't sing inside your head. So with speech practice, you have to actually practice out loud with your body. You can't speak inside of your head. We have like a little kind of most of us have like a little screen for visual stuff that we can like imagine things with, and we have kind of like an audio space that we can kind of visually, or not visually, but we can kind of like call to mind in our mind's ear. Have you heard the term mind's eye before? Like when you're imagining something, you're calling something into your mind's eye. So when you're imagining something that's a sound, you're kind of calling something to your mind's ear. So have I convinced you to practice out loud yet? So hardly are. Now let's say thirdly. So what's complicated about this word? First of all, the TH at the beginning. Third. So if we're going to say third, we're actually using this sound over here. This is the most common schwa R combination sound. Or the most common R sound is the schwa R combination sound. So let's try and just say the first syllable of the word thirdly on its own. Third. Now, again, if you find your R's disappearing into the D and you're saying third or thirdly, like a British accent, and you don't want to do this, we're going to say thir, finish that syllable, push the D to the next syllable so that we allow the R to ring out in full. This is the only way that you won't gobble up the R. You have to allow it to ring out, trick your mind into thinking the other sound is in the next syllable, and then eventually it scales back so that you're saying it normally. Thirdly. So it's like like Thursday. I'm just gonna end on the R. Thirdly. I'm pushing the DLY to the next syllable. Now let's keep the D in the first syllable. Third. Thirdly. Thirdly. So you're gonna connect the RD into the L. You can't really put a pause in there. If you did, it would sound like this. Thirdly. So you need to keep it moving always in English. We always connect our words using like a liaison sound of consonants joining to vowels, or like vowel sounds joined up with Y's, W's, or sometimes glottal stops. Thirdly. So the reason I think it's interesting to talk about these two words, hardly and thirdly, is because in this same environment, when you have a T after an R like this, the T flaps and sounds like a D, right? Let's say the word 30. Does it sound any different than thirdly, except for the fact of that like L? So when we say 30, we're not saying 30, 30. We're not putting a T in thirdly. Sorry, 30, 30. We're saying it the R and the T are becoming like an RD sound. So we call this a flap T because a T in between vowel sounds or a T after an R and before an unstressed vowel, instead of doing a full T release, it's just going to flap. So 30, 30, 30, 30, not 30. So thirdly and 30 are going to sound like this. So hardly and party are going to sound the same, right? So party has a T in the spelling, but not in the pronunciation because we flap the T after an R. Party, hardly, party. Are you going to party for New Year's Eve this year? Are you hardly partying for New Year's Eve? Hopefully that helped with your question. And let me just encourage you again, practice out loud. If you're having trouble with R sounds, like they get lost on the way to other consonants or syllables, isolate the R, doing it on its own, letting it ring out in full before adding on any other consonants so that you don't miss the R. This is kind of like breaking down a compound exercise into smaller components. So let me give the example of like a clean and press. So this is a compound weightlifting movement where you pick up a barbell and then you go underneath of it and press it above your head like that. So if we were going to isolate this movement, we'd probably isolate it into individual movements. Picking up the barbell, right? That's the first movement. Getting underneath of it is the second movement. Pushing it up into a press is the third movement. So you can think of the word thirdly as like thirdly. So you can't just learn it all at once, all three syllables all at once. You have to practice each of the movements in this compound movement individually, basically. You can book your own lessons with me, adnacaccentcoaching.as.me. I have a scheduling site. I'm having a special right now where you can buy a complete package of 15 lessons for like $1,000 or something. So there's a lot of good savings. If you want to look at my website, I have some free time on my calendar and I would love to have some new students. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you watching my very basic budget videos. You still do that, so I'm very happy. So looking forward to a great 2023 with everybody with good pronunciation. Bye.